The cafeteria of the space station was noisy and full of strange smells, but to the human named Daniel, it was the only place he could find a hot meal after long hours of work. He sat at a corner table, tired and quiet, pushing a piece of bread into a bowl of soup. Around him, aliens of many kinds argued, laughed, or stared at glowing screens. No one paid him much attention. He liked it that way. Daniel was halfway through his meal when he felt something, eyes watching him. At first he ignored it. Space stations were full of curious eyes, but the feeling grew stronger. Slowly he looked up. At the far side of the cafeteria, half hidden in the shadows of a broken light, stood 4 small figures. They were thin, almost skeletal. Their clothes were torn and dirty. But what caught Daniel's breath were their eyes. 4 pairs of glowing blue eyes stared at him. Not ordinary blue. These eyes seemed alive, shining in the dim light like tiny stars. Before he could react, the smallest of them stepped forward. Her voice was so soft that Daniel almost missed it. "Can we have your leftovers?" The cafeteria noise faded in his ears. Daniel blinked, not sure he heard right. 4 children, hungry, asking him for scraps. He looked at his tray. Half a bowl of soup, a piece of bread, and some rice. Nothing special. To him, it was just enough for dinner. But to them, it seemed like treasure. Daniel leaned closer. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently. The children nodded, their glowing eyes never leaving his food. Their faces were pale, their cheeks hollow, and their hands trembled as if they had not eaten for days. "Sit," he whispered, motioning to the bench across from him. But they shook their heads quickly, fear flashing in their eyes. The smallest whispered again, "We cannot, please." "Just leftovers." Something about their tone, about the way they kept glancing over their shoulders, made Daniel frown.
Why were they so scared?
It was just food. Why not sit and eat? He pushed his tray toward them, pretending not to notice their hesitation. "Take it, all of it." For a moment they froze. Then the oldest boy, maybe 12 years old, stepped forward. His hands shook as he grabbed the bread and broke it into 4 pieces. The children ate quickly but quietly, like they had learned to hide even while eating. Daniel saw the fear in their movements. This was not just hunger. This was survival. "Slow down," Daniel said softly. "No one will take it from you." But the children did not slow. Their eyes kept darting to the doors of the cafeteria, and Daniel followed their gaze. That was when he noticed something unusual. A group of alien guards stood near the entrance, big, armored, their weapons strapped to their sides. They were not watching the crowd. They were watching the children. Daniel's heart sank. Suddenly, everything made sense, the fear, the whispering, the way the kids refused to sit. They were being hunted. One of the guards spoke into a comm device, his eyes narrowing. The children noticed and froze mid-bite. Panic flashed in their glowing eyes. The oldest boy shoved the last piece of bread into the smallest girl's hands and pulled her back. "Go," he whispered sharply to the others. Before Daniel could ask anything, the 4 children scattered like shadows, disappearing into the back exits of the cafeteria. The guards reacted instantly, storming toward the doors. Daniel felt his gut twist. He wanted to stand up to stop them, but what could he do? A tired human worker against armed guards? Still, something inside him burned. Those blue eyes, he couldn't forget them. The guards pushed through the crowd, searching for the kids. The cafeteria returned to noise, but Daniel no longer heard it. He sat frozen, staring at the empty seat across from him where the children had stood. The soup bowl was empty, the breadcrumbs gone, and only the memory of glowing blue eyes remained. Why were guards chasing starving children? What made their eyes glow like that? Questions spun in his head. But one thing was clear. Those kids were in danger. Daniel finished his water, stood up, and walked out of the cafeteria. He told himself it was not his problem. He was just a worker, just a human trying to survive in a galaxy that didn't care about him. But deep down he knew he could not walk away. He had seen their faces. He had heard their trembling voices. And he knew this was only the beginning. In the cold metal hallways of the space station, the humans' footsteps echoed. Somewhere in the shadows, 4 hungry children were running for their lives. And Daniel had a feeling he was about to be pulled into something far bigger than a simple meal. Because sometimes destiny begins with just one question. Can we have your leftovers? The corridors of the space station always smelled of oil and rust. Daniel walked slowly, his mind replaying the scene from the cafeteria. Those glowing blue eyes refused to leave his thoughts. He had seen hunger before. He had seen children begging before. But this was different. Their fear was sharper than their hunger. Why were they so afraid? Why did guards chase children instead of protecting them? Daniel passed a row of broken vending machines. The humming lights above flickered. Most workers had returned to their quarters, leaving the hallways quiet. Only the distant footsteps of patrolling guards echoed in the distance. He stopped near a window, staring out into the endless black of space. His reflection looked back at him, a tired human, face rough with stubble, clothes stained from work in the repair docks. He had no reason to get involved. This was not his fight. Yet his fists clenched. The smallest girl's voice whispered again in his memory, "Can we have your leftovers?" He sighed, rubbed his face, and shook his head. I can't just ignore this. Later that night, Daniel returned to the lower decks where few dared to go. The smell of mold and smoke filled the air. It was the kind of place where the station's cameras didn't work and the guards rarely patrolled. If those kids were hiding anywhere, it had to be here. He walked through dark corridors, his boots echoing against metal floors. He turned a corner and froze, a sound, soft whispers, the sound of children arguing in hushed voices. He followed it carefully, moving slower until he saw them. The 4 children huddled in a small storage room, sitting on the cold floor. They had no blankets, no pillows, only their arms wrapped around themselves for warmth. Daniel stayed in the shadows, watching. The smallest girl, the one who had spoken to him, licked her fingers, trying to taste the last crumbs of bread. The oldest boy kept looking at the door, alert, as if expecting danger to burst in at any second. The other 2 children, a boy and a girl, pressed close together, whispering softly. Daniel leaned closer and caught a few words. "They'll find us. They always find us," the girl murmured. "Not tonight," the older boy replied firmly, though his shaking hands betrayed his fear. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen desperation before, but this was something deeper. These children were not just hungry, they were being hunted. He stepped forward, making just enough sound to alert them. Instantly, the kids jumped to their feet. The oldest boy grabbed a broken pipe from the ground and held it like a weapon. "It's me," Daniel said quickly, raising his hands. "The man from the cafeteria." The glowing eyes widened. The smallest girl stepped forward. "Why are you here?" she whispered. Daniel knelt down so he wouldn't look threatening. "Because I want to know why you're running. Why guards are after you, and," he glanced at their trembling hands, "because you need more than scraps." The boy didn't lower the pipe. "You should leave. They'll hurt you if they see you with us." Daniel stayed calm. "Then let them." "I don't care. I just want to help." For a long moment, silence hung in the air. Then slowly the boy lowered the pipe. His glowing eyes softened just a little. The smallest girl sat back down. "We are always hungry," she whispered. "We can never eat enough. If we stay in one place too long, they find us." "Who?" Daniel asked gently. "The hunters," the boy replied. His voice shook with anger. "They don't care that we are children. They don't care that we are starving. They only care about this." He tapped the side of his glowing eye. Daniel frowned. "Your eyes?" The children nodded. "They call us cursed," the older girl said softly. "But others, they call us valuable. Both are dangerous." Daniel's mind spun. Valuable? Cursed? What was so special about glowing blue eyes? Before he could ask more, a loud clang echoed through the hallway outside. The children stiffened, their faces pale. "They're coming," the boy hissed. Daniel stood, moving to the door. He peeked out and saw shadows stretching along the walls, several tall figures moving closer. The guards, his heart pounded. He looked back at the children. They were huddled together, terrified. Daniel had a choice: walk away and save himself, or stay and risk everything for 4 kids he had just met. He clenched his fists. The answer came without doubt. "Stay behind me," he whispered firmly. "If they come in, I'll deal with them." The boy shook his head. "You'll die," Daniel gave a tight smile. "Maybe, but at least you'll live." The footsteps grew louder. The storage door rattled as if someone was testing the lock. The children gasped and pressed close together. Daniel positioned himself between them and the door, his heart racing. For a moment, silence. Then the footsteps passed. The shadows disappeared down the hall. The kids exhaled in relief. Daniel pressed his hand to the door, waiting until the air was quiet again. When he turned, he saw 4 pairs of glowing blue eyes staring at him, not with fear this time, but with something else, trust. Daniel nodded. Tomorrow I'll bring food, real food. But you'll need to tell me more. I need to understand why they want you so badly. The smallest girl whispered, her voice trembling. If you know, you'll be in danger too. Daniel crouched down, meeting her glowing eyes. Then we'll be in danger together. The children exchanged uncertain looks, but for the first time a flicker of hope touched their faces. Outside, the metal corridors of the station stretched endlessly, full of shadows and secrets. But inside that tiny storage room, something had begun. An alliance between a tired human and 4 hunted children. And though none of them knew it yet, that alliance would shake the future of more than just the space station. It would shake the galaxy itself. The storage room was dark and damp, but it had become a fragile shelter for the 4 alien children and the 1 human who decided to care. Daniel sat on the cold floor, his back against the wall, watching the kids sleep. Their breathing was shallow, their thin frames trembling even in rest. He had promised to bring them food. But Daniel knew food alone would not solve their problem. Guards were hunting them, hunters, and for some reason, their glowing blue eyes were worth more than their lives. As he watched, he thought of Earth. Back home, children laughed in the parks, chased balls or begged for sweets. Here in the middle of a galactic station, children hid like criminals. His jaw tightened. Something inside him burned. The next morning, Daniel slipped out early. The station was waking up, workers rushing to shifts, traders shouting prices, machines buzzing in the background. He bought extra bread, dried fruit, and a bottle of clean water with the few credits he had left. It was not much, but it was something. He made his way back toward the lower decks. But as he turned a corner, he froze. 3 guards stood in the hallway ahead, talking to a pale alien merchant. The merchant pointed down the corridor, fear in his eyes. Daniel's stomach sank. They were close. He turned quickly, trying to blend into the crowd, but 1 guard noticed him. Their gaze locked. The guard's eyes narrowed. Daniel forced himself to keep walking, heart pounding in his chest. He reached the storage room and tapped softly on the metal door. The children's glowing eyes appeared through a small crack. The oldest boy pulled him inside. You shouldn't have come, the boy whispered harshly. Daniel set the bag down. I told you I would bring food. The smallest girl's eyes widened at the sight of bread. Her tiny hands grabbed it eagerly, but she waited for her siblings before taking a bite. Daniel noticed how carefully they shared, how nothing was wasted, not even crumbs. They're searching this area, Daniel said, keeping his voice low. We can't stay here. If they find you, the boy's jaw tightened. They always find us. Not this time, Daniel said firmly. We'll move. The children exchanged uncertain glances. Trusting anyone was dangerous, but they had little choice. They left the storage room, sticking close to the walls. Daniel led the way, scanning each corner. The lower deck smelled worse than before, trash, smoke, and spilled chemicals. The air was heavy, and the hum of machines covered the sound of their footsteps. Suddenly, a shout echoed behind them. There, the blue eyes. The children froze. Daniel turned and saw 2 guards running toward them, weapons at their sides. Run! Daniel shouted. The chase began. The children sprinted ahead, their bare feet slapping against the floor. Daniel followed, his lungs burning. The narrow corridors twisted and turned like a maze. Shouts and footsteps echoed behind them, closer with every second. The smallest girl stumbled, and Daniel scooped her up without stopping. Her tiny arms wrapped around his neck, her glowing eyes wide with fear. This way, the older boy shouted, leading them down a side tunnel. They burst into a market alley filled with stalls and shouting vendors. Daniel shoved past crates of alien fruit, knocking over baskets to block the path behind them. The guards pushed through, knocking aside merchants who yelled in protest. Faster, Daniel urged, his legs screaming in pain. The children darted between legs and under tables, moving like shadows. Daniel stayed close, clutching the smallest girl. He glanced back. More guards had joined the chase. The alley split into 2 paths. Which way? Daniel gasped. The boy pointed left. Storage tunnels. They dashed into the left passage. It was darker, quieter. Pipes hissed overhead, dripping water onto the floor. The sound of boots echoed behind them, still chasing. Daniel's breath came hard and fast. His body wanted to stop, but his mind screamed at him to keep going. They reached a locked gate. The boy pulled at it desperately. It's stuck. Daniel set the girl down and threw his weight against the gate. It groaned, then finally burst open. They slipped through just as the guards rounded the corner. Daniel slammed the gate shut, wedging a metal bar into the latch. The guards hit it seconds later, their fists pounding against the steel. The children pressed close together, trembling. Daniel's chest heaved, sweat dripping down his face. For a moment, silence. Only their ragged breathing filled the tunnel. Then the oldest boy whispered, "They'll never stop. Not until we're caught." Daniel looked at him, then at the others. "Then we don't let them catch you." "Not ever." The boy's glowing eyes studied him carefully. "Why? Why would a human risk his life for us?" Daniel crouched, meeting his gaze. "Because no child should have to beg for scraps. Because no one should live in fear like this. And because—" He paused, his voice hardening. "I've seen those guards. They're cowards who think they're strong. I won't let them win." The children stared at him, silent. For the first time, a spark of hope flickered in their glowing eyes. Far down the tunnel, the sound of metal being cut reached their ears. The guards were trying to break the gate. Daniel stood tall, determination in his eyes. "We need a new hiding place, and I think I know where." He picked up the smallest girl again, her tiny fingers clutching his shirt. The others followed, their trust slowly forming. Behind them, the gate screeched under the guards' tools. The chase was far from over, but for the first time, the hunted children were not running alone. The tunnels stretched endlessly, twisting like the veins of the station itself. The air was damp, heavy with the stench of rust and leaking pipes. Daniel's boots splashed in puddles as he carried the smallest girl. Behind him, the other 3 children followed close, their glowing blue eyes glowing like lanterns in the dark. The sound of guards breaking through the gate still echoed faintly behind them, but for now they had gained some distance. "Where are you taking us?" the older boy demanded, his voice firm but shaking. Daniel adjusted the little girl in his arms. "A place no one looks anymore. The old repair hangars, abandoned for years. If we can reach them, you'll be safe for a while." The boy narrowed his eyes, suspicious. "Why are you helping us? You could die because of us." Daniel looked straight ahead, his jaw set. "Because I don't walk away from hungry children. And because I know what it's like to be hunted." The boy blinked, taken aback. For a moment, silence hung between them. They finally reached the hangar. The massive doors were sealed, but Daniel knew a side entrance from his repair days. He led them through a narrow gap in the rusted metal. Inside, the hangar was silent and dark, filled with broken ships and forgotten crates. Dust covered everything, and the smell of old fuel lingered in the air. The children sat together on a crate, huddled for warmth. Daniel handed out the last of the bread and water he carried. As they ate in silence, he studied them. Their glowing eyes were not just strange, they were unnatural. Too bright, too alive, and the fear in their faces was not the fear of simple poverty. It was deeper. Something hunted them for what they were, not for what they had done. Daniel finally asked, "What's so special about your eyes?" The children froze. The older boy lowered his bread slowly, his jaw tightening. "You wouldn't believe us," the girl whispered. "Try me," Daniel said firmly. The boy hesitated, then sighed. "Our people. They used to rule. A long time ago. Before the empires you see now. Before the council, before the guards. Blue-eyed children were the sign of the true bloodline. The leaders of the clans." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Leaders? You mean kings?" The boy nodded. "Yes. But when the clans were defeated, our families were hunted. Anyone with these eyes was killed or sold. Some call us cursed, others call us valuable. Either way, we can't live free. We are trophies." Daniel's chest tightened. He thought of the way the guards had chased them. Not like beggars or thieves, like prey. "So they want to use you," he muttered. The boy's voice grew bitter. "They want to own us. Whoever controls us can claim to be the rightful ruler. Our eyes are proof." The youngest girl, sitting in Daniel's lap, whispered softly, "We didn't ask for this. We just wanted food. We just wanted to live." Her small words stabbed into Daniel's heart like a knife. He clenched his fists. "You're not trophies," he said sharply. "You're children. And no one is going to own you as long as I'm breathing." The children stared at him, surprised by the heat in his voice. The older boy's lips trembled. He looked away quickly, but Daniel noticed his shoulders shake. He was holding back tears. The silence was broken by a loud clang outside the hangar. The children stiffened. Daniel stood immediately, moving toward the side door. He peeked through a crack. Guards. At least 6 of them, sweeping the area with scanners. "They're here," Daniel whispered. The boy's face went pale. They'll never stop. Daniel turned back to the children. Then we don't stop either. You said your eyes prove leadership. That makes you more than targets. It makes you a threat to whoever rules now. They're afraid of you. That's why they want you gone. The children exchanged uncertain looks. The older girl whispered, "But we're just kids." Daniel knelt down, his gaze steady. "Yes, but kids can grow. And one day, you can take back what was stolen. You have a future if you survive long enough to see it. That's why we fight now." The boy's eyes shone brighter, anger mixing with determination. "Then we run again?" Daniel shook his head. "No, we plan. Running buys time, but planning buys freedom." He pointed to the old ships around them. "This hangar is filled with junk, but junk can hide you. Tomorrow I'll gather supplies and we'll move from here. Every time they close in, we'll slip through their fingers. And when the time comes," he paused, his voice hardening, "we'll make sure they never chase you again." The children sat in silence, their glowing eyes reflecting faint sparks of hope. But outside, the sound of boots grew louder. The guards were closing in. Daniel stood tall, his hand tightening into a fist. "Stay quiet. Stay hidden. Whatever happens, don't come out until I return." The boy's eyes widened. "Where are you going?" Daniel gave a small smile. To distract the wolves, he slipped out the side door, vanishing into the shadows of the hangar. Inside, the 4 children huddled together, their blue eyes glowing softly in the darkness. For the first time in their short hunted lives, they felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. The hangar was filled with silence, broken only by the distant hiss of pipes. The 4 children huddled in the shadows, their glowing blue eyes watching the side door where Daniel had disappeared. Fear pressed heavy on their small chests. They knew the guards were close, and they knew one human alone could not stand against so many. But Daniel was not like the others. Outside, Daniel crouched behind a rusted engine block, listening. The guards' heavy boots pounded against the floor as they spread out, scanning the hangar with glowing visors. Their voices were low and harsh. "Blue eyes detected in this sector," one guard growled. Daniel clenched his jaw. They weren't even calling them children. To them, the kids were nothing but prey, a prize to be collected. He looked around quickly. Broken ships, loose pipes, abandoned crates. This place was filled with junk, but junk could become weapons. His mind raced back to his days on Earth, when his father had taught him to survive with nothing but his hands and a sharp mind. He grabbed a loose metal rod, heavy, but balanced. It wasn't a blaster, but it would have to do. The guards split into pairs, sweeping the hangar. One came dangerously close to the crate where the children hid. The boy held his siblings tight, whispering, "Don't move. Don't breathe." Just as the guard lifted his scanner, a loud crash echoed across the hangar. A stack of crates toppled over in the far corner. "Over there!" the guard shouted, running toward the sound. The children's eyes widened. That was no accident. Daniel had thrown a piece of scrap, creating the distraction. Daniel moved fast, slipping between shadows. He struck from behind, swinging the metal rod hard into the knee joint of one guard. The alien let out a cry and fell, his scanner clattering to the ground. Daniel didn't stop. He slammed the rod into the guard's helmet, knocking him out cold. "Human!" Another guard roared, raising his blaster. Daniel dove behind cover as energy bolts burned into the walls. Sparks flew. His heart pounded, but his mind stayed sharp. He grabbed a loose power cell from the floor and hurled it at the guard. The cell exploded in a flash, knocking the alien back. 2 down. 4 to go. Inside the crate, the smallest girl clutched her brother's arm. "He's fighting for us," she whispered, her voice trembling. The boy's throat tightened. No one had ever fought for them before. Daniel ducked behind an old ship hull, catching his breath. He could hear the guards regrouping, barking orders. "Spread out. Find the kids." Daniel's blood boiled. They didn't care about him, only about the children. That made him dangerous, unpredictable. He picked up a coil of wire from the ground and stretched it across the walkway between 2 crates. Then he whistled loud enough to draw attention. 2 guards stormed toward the sound. They didn't see the wire. Their boots tangled and both crashed hard to the floor. Daniel pounced, striking fast and hard, knocking one unconscious and slamming the other's helmet against the ground until he stopped moving. Now only 2 remained. The children peeked through the cracks, their glowing eyes wide. The older girl whispered, "He's alone, but he fights like an army." The boy nodded, awe mixing with fear. He doesn't run. He stands. The last two guards regrouped at the center of the hangar, their blasters raised. Daniel stepped out from behind the shadows, gripping his dented metal rod. "Looking for someone?" he said, his voice steady. The guard snarled. "Hand over the blue eyes, human, and maybe we'll let you live." Daniel's lips curled into a tight smile. "You'll have to go through me," they fired. Daniel dove to the ground, rolling behind a broken shuttle wing. Energy bolts tore through the air, filling the hangar with fire and smoke. He gritted his teeth, feeling the heat burn against his arm. He spotted a loose fuel canister half buried under scrap. His mind raced. Dangerous, but effective. He grabbed a piece of metal and hurled it across the hangar, making the guards turn. Then he sprinted toward the canister, lifted it with all his strength, and hurled it toward them. They fired instinctively. The shot struck the canister. The explosion shook the hangar, fire and smoke blasting outward. The two guards were thrown against the wall, their armor sparking. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of flames. Daniel staggered, coughing from the smoke. His arms ached, his legs trembled, but he was still standing. Slowly, the children crept out from hiding, their glowing blue eyes reflecting the firelight. They stared at him, stunned. The smallest girl whispered, "You beat them." Daniel wiped sweat from his brow and gave a tired grin. "Told you I don't run." The boy stepped forward, his voice shaky. "Why risk so much for us?" "You could have died." Daniel looked at them, his gaze steady. "Because someone has to stand. If no one fights for you, then the galaxy wins. And I'm not about to let that happen." The boy's lips trembled, but he nodded slowly. For the first time, he didn't see Daniel as just a stranger. He saw him as something more. A protector. But as Daniel looked at the unconscious guards scattered across the floor, his heart sank. This was just the beginning. These weren't the only hunters. More would come, stronger, smarter. He turned to the children. "We can't stay here. They'll send more. We need to move now." The children nodded, trust shining in their glowing eyes, and so, with smoke still rising behind them, a tired human and 4 hunted children disappeared into the shadows once again. Daniel's body was battered, his arms heavy, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. Because for the first time in his life, he had something worth standing for. The hangar lay in ruins behind them, smoke curling up toward the broken ceiling. The unconscious guards scattered across the floor would not stay down forever. Daniel knew reinforcements were already on their way. He led the children through a maintenance shaft, his body aching with every step. His arms stung from burns, his lungs hurt from smoke, and his legs felt heavy as stone. Yet he did not slow down. 4 pairs of glowing blue eyes followed him in silence, trusting his every step. The oldest boy finally spoke. "You fought like a soldier, but you're not one, are you?" Daniel gave a tired smile. "No, I'm just a man who's too stubborn to run." The boy frowned. "But stubbornness will get you killed." Daniel's smile faded. "Maybe, but if I die keeping you safe, it's worth it." They slipped into a narrow tunnel. Pipes dripped overhead and the air was thick with steam. Daniel paused, catching his breath. The children huddled close together, their faces pale. He handed them the last piece of dried fruit from his pocket. "You need this more than I do," he said. The smallest girl shook her head. "No, you fought. You're hurt. You need it." Daniel crouched down, looking her in the eyes. "I'll be fine. You need to keep your strength." Her tiny hands trembled as she accepted the fruit, breaking it carefully into 4 pieces so they could all share. Daniel's chest tightened. Even in hunger, they thought of each other first. A distant alarm wailed through the station. The children stiffened. The boy whispered, "They know." Daniel nodded grimly. The guards had already reported back. The station would soon be crawling with hunters. He rubbed his forehead. Running wouldn't be enough anymore. If they wanted to survive, they had to vanish completely. "There's an old smuggler's bay," Daniel said finally. "Few know it still exists. If we can reach it, I can get you off this station." The boy's eyes widened. "Off the station? Where would we go?" "Somewhere safer," Daniel replied. "Anywhere but here," the boy's voice cracked. "You don't understand. They'll follow us anywhere. They always do." Daniel placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then let them follow me. I'll give them something else to chase," the children gasped. The older girl shook her head. "No. You'll die if you face them alone." Daniel's voice was calm but hard. "If I don't, they'll take you. And I won't let that happen." The boy's eyes flashed. "You don't owe us anything. Why throw your life away for us?" Daniel's jaw tightened. Because I've seen too many people look the other way. I won't be one of them. The boy stared at him, words caught in his throat. For the first time, someone was willing to bleed for them, not for Poway. The belief that they deserved to live. They reached the smuggler's bay, a massive chamber filled with rusted docking arms and abandoned ships. Dust coated the floor and silence pressed heavy. Daniel searched quickly, finding an old freighter covered in tarps. This one might still run, he muttered. The children climbed inside, their glowing eyes scanning the dark interior. The smallest girl curled up on a seat, clutching her knees. The older girl checked the corners nervously. The boy stood at the door, fists clenched. Daniel worked at the controls, sparks flying as he tried to reroute power. His hands shook from exhaustion. Then, footsteps. Dozens of them. Daniel froze. The sound came closer, boots pounding against metal. The hunters had found them. He turned to the children. Stay hidden in here. No matter what you hear, don't come out, the boy grabbed his arm. No, if you go out there, they'll kill you. Daniel placed the metal rod back into his hand and smiled faintly. Maybe. But they'll remember me long enough for you to escape. The boy's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, but no words came. His eyes glistened as he whispered, Why human? Why for us? Daniel's voice was steady. Because you remind me of something I thought the galaxy had lost. Hope. And hope is worth any price. He stepped out of the freighter, closing the hatch behind him. The chamber filled with shadows as guards poured in, weapons raised. Their leader stepped forward, his voice cold. You've caused enough trouble, human. Give us the children and maybe we'll let you live. Daniel tightened his grip on the rod. His body ached, his muscles screamed, but his spirit burned. He took a step forward, his voice ringing through the bay. You'll have to kill me first. The guard sneered. So be it. Blasters hummed, charging with deadly light. Daniel stood tall, his shadow stretching across the bay, defiant and unyielding. Inside the freighter, the children pressed their ears to the walls, trembling. They heard the clash outside, the sound of metal against armor, the roar of blasters. They heard Daniel's voice, and fierce, unbroken. Every strike, every cry, every breath was the price he paid for their lives. The battle raged. Daniel fought with everything he had, his body pushed past the edge of exhaustion. Each blow of his rod cracked against armor. Each dodge grew slower, each breath heavier. Yet he refused to fall. Finally, silence fell. Smoke hung in the bay. Daniel staggered, his body battered, blood dripping from his arm. Around him, several guards lay unconscious. Others fled, retreating to regroup. He fell to one knee, gripping the floor. The freighter's hatch opened. The children rushed out, their glowing eyes wide with tears. The smallest girl threw her arms around him. You're hurt, she cried. Daniel managed a weak smile. Just scratches. The boy knelt beside him, his hands shaking. You risked everything. For us. Daniel looked at him, his voice low but strong. That's what protection means. Sometimes it costs more than you want to give. Sometimes it costs everything. His eyes hardened. But I'd pay it again. The smuggler's bay was filled with smoke and silence. Broken weapons lay scattered across the floor. The smell of burnt metal hung in the air. Daniel leaned against the side of the freighter, his body bruised, his breath heavy. He had fought with everything inside him, and somehow he was still standing. The children surrounded him, their glowing blue eyes wide with worry. The smallest girl held his arm tightly, refusing to let go. Don't leave us, she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel looked down at her fragile hands gripping his sleeve. His chest ached, not from wounds, but from the thought of how much they had already suffered. He placed his rough hand gently on her head. I'm not going anywhere. Not while you need me. The older boy glanced around nervously. More guards will come. We can't stay here. Daniel nodded weakly. You're right. This place isn't safe anymore. But the freighter, it can still fly. The children's eyes lit up. Fly? Away from here? The older girl asked, her voice filled with both hope and fear. Daniel forced himself to his feet, gripping the side of the ship for support. Yes, I've worked on ships like this before. If we can get it started, we'll leave this cursed station behind. The boy frowned. And go where? They'll follow us. They always do. Daniel's eyes hardened. Then let them follow me. As long as they chase me, they won't catch you. The boy shook his head. You can't keep protecting us forever. Daniel crouched in front of him, meeting his glowing eyes. Maybe not. But I can protect you long enough for you to find your place in this galaxy. Long enough for you to grow strong. The boy's lips trembled. For a moment he looked less like a hunted heir and more like what he truly was, a child. He whispered, "Why do you care so much?" Daniel's voice softened. "Because I see something in you I thought was gone from this galaxy. Hope. And if hope survives, tomorrow can be better." They climbed into the freighter. Dust and cobwebs coated the seats and the control panels flickered weakly. Daniel slid into the pilot's chair, his fingers working across the console. Sparks jumped as he rerouted ancient wires. The engines coughed, then roared to life. The children gasped as the ship shuddered beneath them. The smallest girl gripped the armrest, her eyes wide. "We're really leaving?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes, little one. Hold on tight." The freighter lifted slowly, rising from the floor. The docking doors groaned as they opened, revealing the endless black of space. Stars glittered like diamonds, and for the first time the children saw freedom stretched before them. But then, the alarm blared. Daniel's heart sank. The station's defense ships were already mobilizing, blocking their escape. The boy clenched his fists. "They'll shoot us down." Daniel's mind raced. He had one chance. He pulled the ship sharply to the side, steering it through the narrow maintenance tunnels of the station's outer ring. Metal scraped against the hull as sparks flew. The children cried out, but Daniel's hand stayed steady on the controls. Behind them, the defense ships fired, energy bolts scorching the walls. The freighter rocked violently, alarms screaming, but Daniel gritted his teeth and pushed forward. Finally, with one last burst of power, the freighter broke free into open space. The stars swallowed them, the station shrinking behind. The children stared out the window, their glowing blue eyes reflecting the starlight. Tears streamed down their cheeks. "We're free," the older girl whispered. Daniel glanced at them, his chest heavy with exhaustion but light with relief. "You're safe. That's what matters." Silence filled the cabin for a while, broken only by the hum of the engines. The children huddled together, their heads resting on each other's shoulders. For the first time, their trembling stopped. The boy finally turned to Daniel. "You've risked everything for us. We have nothing to give you." Daniel shook his head. "You've already given me something." The boy frowned. "What?" Daniel's tired smile returned. "A reason to fight again." The boy swallowed hard. Then he stood straighter, his glowing eyes steady. "One day when we're grown, when we're strong, we'll find you. We'll repay you." Daniel's smile softened. "I don't need repayment. Just promise me one thing." The boy nodded. "Anything." "Promise me," Daniel said quietly, "that you'll never forget what it feels like to be hungry or hunted or scared. When you're strong enough to lead, remember the weak. Protect them, feed them, stand for them, like I stood for you." The boy's eyes shimmered. He placed his small hand over Daniel's. "I promise." The smallest girl added, her voice tiny but firm, "We'll never forget you. Human, never." Daniel leaned back in the pilot's chair, closing his eyes for a moment. The freighter sailed through the stars, carrying 4 hunted children and one tired protector into an uncertain tomorrow. But for the first time in a long time, tomorrow did not feel like something to fear. It felt like a promise,